Hi, we're glad you joined us today for Our Heritage. We have a special day today. We have a friend, somebody that I've known very well, especially the last 2 years, Mr. Chris Adams.
How are you doing, Ms.
I'm
Carol?
fine. Chris spoke to us at the History at High Noon the other day, and I asked him to come and do Our Heritage. And today we're going to find out what got him so interested in the Muskogee Creeks.
Well, early on, my family, when I did my genealogy on my family, I traced it back. Several members of my family showed Muskogee influence, and from there it picked up to retracing my roots, and it led me to Tama Tribal Town in Wiggum, Georgia. Met some friends, and basically my friends over there at the Lower Muskogee Creek Reservation, they've kind of adopted me in and immersed me in the culture, so to speak. And it's always been an interest to me about the people who lived here before white settlers came.
Right. Well, tell me a little bit about that reservation, because I know there's not a lot of Indian reservations, so to speak, or Native Americans in Coffee County.
Now, as for the reservation, it's situated on about 130, 135 acres. There's not too many people that live on it, but it is the only Indian reservation in the state of Georgia.
Great, that's super to know. Tell me a little bit about their customs.
Now, the Muskogee people, it dates back, it's matrilineal, so it goes by the mother in the family, so women have a lot of influence over the tribe, and that's what I enjoy about it.
Me too.
I like being told what to do. It gives us something to run with. But as for customs, they're religious. They are Christian based. They have churches just like everywhere else in South Georgia. They grew up Christian. Here in the 1800s, the early part of the century, the whites and the Creeks, they lived in pretty much mutual harmony until the Jackson administration started pushing them out, and that forced them to flee in the swamps and nearby areas, which is what the word Muskogee means. It means dwellers of the swamp. And it's a fitting title when people are trying to shoot at you and you have to get out of the way pretty quickly. But that's also where my family comes into play. I had an ancestor who married a white man. Her name was Serena Foy, and that was the only reason that she got to stay. That's where most of the Creek influence comes from in my family. But when she married this Ricketson man, all of her ancestral ties had to be cut. So right then she had to immerse herself into white society and to try as much as she could be to be white.
Well, now this cutting, was that from the white community or the Muskogee, or was it a combination?
Pretty sure it was mutual. From what I can tell through records and accounts of the family, it was mutual. Her family had long since left, pretty much right after the wedding. If it was even an actual wedding, it could have been common law.
Right.
But over time, she learned to just live life as everyone else in Wiregrass, South Georgia would.
That was a big undertaking for her, a total culture shock in many ways. Tell us about some of the things that the Muskogee, you talked the other day about some of the animals that they incorporate in their life and their symbolism.
Well, in many ways, each and every animal in the woods of South Georgia has some sort of prominence to the Muskogee people. For example, a young warrior, his camp, if he was around a tribal town or out in the woods somewhere, the sign of that young warrior was to hang a bobcat pelt in his camp, and that signified that he was a young warrior. The women use shakers in our ceremonial dances, which is what we call a stomp dance. The shakers are box turtle shells, and the box turtle is that animal the old creation story dates back to, and the turtle is basically the center of all life in the creation story. So in the square ground, when we do the stomp dance, the Miko, the head who leads the dance, he yells, Loja, 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 and that's turtle. He's giving thanks to Creator for sending the turtle to become the land. And in a sense, box turtle, or turtles in general, one of the most important things in Muskogee culture, which also gives way to my nickname, Turtle Man, on Loja.
So that's different. We talked the other day, somebody said about the leaders were called chiefs, but that's not necessarily so with the Muskogee.
That's what our Mikos are. So like today, the Tama Tribal Town, we have a principal chief, but originally that name for chief would have been Miko, and that was more or less an elder who gave guidance to the people in the communities.
But it was not
Not per
TV,
se.
not
Yeah,
TV chief.
Not the headdress sitting on the white horse coming across the plains sort of chief.
I get amused when I go to Cherokee, North Carolina, and they want you to have your picture made with a man with a feather headdress and a teepee, and Cherokees
Yeah,
never had either
Cherokees
one.
never used teepees, the Creeks never used them.
It's funny how TV influences us. Tell us a little bit more about some of the things that they would do, the way they would build or live, and the way the white man influenced them some.
Well, originally, we have to go back about 8,000 years here in Coffee
Okay.
County. So we're taking a time jump there. First people start to come into Coffee County and they were nomadic. They were running the river bottoms and creeks, basically the 17-mile river and Otter Creek over there. They were looking for hickory nuts and acorns to ground into meal. Well, what they'd live in were structures that were basically made out of cypress poles, pine poles they could find, something they could carry with them or something they could leave behind and find somewhere else. But over time, when permanent settlements started to come up, they created several types of structures. One was the most predominant in the swampier regions, called a chakee, which was basically a pole frame. It had an elevated floor off of it, and it was thatched with palmetto. The roof was. The other was a wattle and daub home, and that's what you see more in the villages where they were. And it was basically clay and mortar mixed in. They patted on the walls of these woven sticks and logs and things, and they make a square home. Their living quarters in the towns were in squares because there's 4 seasons. They'd have a seasonal home and a cook fire in the middle. But as time progressed, Benjamin Hawkins Creek Agency came down to try and help them immerse themselves much more into white civilization and wiregrass. So he presented to them a farming plan, and when he did, he created a cabin that had no windows, no ventilation, only one door.
In South Georgia.
In South Georgia. And we're talking about a people who were used to living thousands of years outside, well ventilated. They said, we can't have this. So they asked Hawkins for the tools, and within about a week, they duplicated another cabin, put windows in it, and created a breezeway, and that's what we know as the dog trot design. That's creek influenced, and you see that much more in South Georgia, and you don't just think driving beside the road that's influenced by Native Americans here.
Right. Okay, you talked about the swamps where it's built above ground, and when I visited the Seminoles in Florida, their traditional homes were built above with the thatch roof. The connection there.
The connection is the Seminole people in South Florida are Creek Indians, but Creek Indians are not Seminole.
Okay.
The reason for that, after the Civil War, the Creek Civil War, 1813, 1814, Battle of Horseshoe Bend, well, they had the upper Red Stick Creeks and the lower creeks called the White Sticks or the Friendly Creeks. Well, time went on, the upper Red Stick Creeks made their way into South Georgia trying to get to Florida via the swamps. And when they got down there, they met up with runaway slaves. They met up with basically who they call Cameroons, the runaways.
Right.
And the word Seminole itself comes into play about 1740, 1750, and it's used from an old Spanish word, Cimarron, meaning renegade, wild one, lost one. So all of the Seminoles in Florida today are descendants of those runaways, basically, from different tribes, different bands here in South Georgia, Alabama, and even Mississippi in some cases. And they made their way into South Florida and created their own little civilization down around the Everglades.
Yeah. It's just interesting that they took their traits with them as they went. It's just, Cherokee, are they related to the Cherokee?
Now the Cherokee as a whole are an Algonquin variety. They're up north, so they're centered around the Algonquin speaking people. The Creeks themselves and a lot of our lower southeastern indigenous people, they're descendants of Central American people, the Olmecs, the Mayas, and you see that influence a lot in their art. You go, let's say, 1350 here in Central Georgia, the Okmulgee Mounds up around Macon.
Right.
So the mounds were created by the Mississippian people, the mound builders. What we think, what's a plausible reason for that they built it out of earth instead of stone, look at some of the temple mounds down in Central America, built of field stone. We like that here, obviously. But there's a really detailed parallel between the two cultures, and you see that a lot in their art, in the way they build things, and in the way they live. and these people were trading all the way from the Caribbean, Central America, and even the coast of Venezuela down there, all the way back up here to the southeastern states, Florida, Georgia, Alabama. You see that in trade items. But the real difference is just the dialect. The reason there were several bands or several tribes of people in the Creek Confederacy, some of them spoke different languages, but the majority of them spoke Muskogean language. And that Muskogee is the dialect. That's where the name for the people comes from.
Okay. Speaking of trade, what kind of things did they think were important or precious to them?
Now, we talked pre-Columbian, before DeSoto and the explorers came here. They were trading shells, anything from conch shells down in the Caribbean for war horns, kind of like a bugle, or different shell beads, glass, beach glass, things that they had found, stuff that they saw as desirable then, that we'd see as just trinkets now. But when the English came, Spanish, the French, and they all settled within this vicinity of South Georgia, they started to trade glass beads and silver medals. The thing about the Creek people is they did not like anything gold. The reason for that is because what did the English come for in search of?
Gold.
They came to search for gold. So silver was something that they accepted more, gorgets, ringlets, different things that they could wear, earrings, ear bobs, nose rings, all sorts of things that they hadn't had. But one of the most favorable things was this cloth that they were bringing in. We'll say by about 1820, you could not expect to see many Creeks wearing anything other than bright, colorful clothing. Same goes for the Seminole people down in Florida. And this was because they favored these bright colors, even like people call it red and blues. The Creek people around here especially favored a blue. And a lot of the early details from surveyors and and people in this area, they mention that in their inscriptions.
That is amazing. Anything else you'd like to add about the Muskogee?
Well, to talk about the trade also, Mary Musgrove, who worked as an interpreter for Oglethorpe when he came here, Musgrove actually married an Englishman. He was a minister by the name of Bosomworth, and they actually had a trading post at the forks of the Altamaha and the Okmulgee, Bosomworth's trading fort. So to think that someone that close to Oglethorpe has some relation to Coffee County, even the English were trading here down here in South Georgia as early as 1650. So there was a lot of influence early on, but what we know about the Creek people in Coffee County is by 1838, after several incidents, one in 1836 I'd like to call the Indian Summer. 1836 was the peak of it in South Georgia for actions against the whites and actions against the Creeks fleeing to Florida. By 1838, there were very few Creeks left here, and the ones that were hid out, just like my ancestors and many others around the county.
And like the Cherokee, they about that time too, they were being shoved out.
Gone.
The civilization has a tendency to get rid of indigenous and move them on out.
That's what we call progress.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, that's right, progress. Anything else you'd like to add, Chris?
Not unless you want me to.
Thank you so much for coming today. I appreciate it so much, and we will be right back. Welcome back. We're going to tie up today with loose ends and some promises for the future. First of all, Historical Society meets October the 9th at 9 a.m. Anyone is welcome to come. Of course, you can't vote if you're not a member, but we'd love to have anybody that would like to come to the meeting. Please come. It's here at the museum. Second of all, we're having, between us, the Coffee County Historical Society, and the Coffee Alliance of the Arts, we're having a walk through the neighborhood again this year. It was a tremendous success last year. Everybody had a good time. We walk through the cemetery, we learn things as we go, but there are actors portraying certain people as we will meet and greet and talk to them and learn a little bit about their past and the stories of their lives. Sometimes it's really funny and sometimes it's just amusing, but it's nothing scary or anything like that. It's just for fun and to learn about our past, not just the businessmen, but the people in our community. It is on Friday the 13th at 5:30 is our first tour. And after the tour, you're welcome to come back to the museum for a little reception time and discussion and just viewing the museum. The second tour is on Saturday the 14th at 10 a.m. Both tours will last maybe an hour, hour and 15 minutes at the most if people have a lot of questions. But that we were shooting for an hour because, you know, we're old. We don't want to walk a lot. Tickets are $10. They're available at the Ashley Slater House or at the museum. Or if you contact me, Carol Morgan, everybody has my cell phone. It's on our Facebook page. You just give me a call and I'll see that you get tickets. The next thing we have coming up in November, I want you to go ahead and put on your calendar. The Wiregrass Art Guild does their Artist of the Year feature in reception, and it will be here this year at the museum, November the 18th, it's Saturday from 2 to 6, I believe. I'll double check those hours later, make sure I'm right. But please, you feel free to come. There's no cost to come to that. You just come, see the art and the artist, and enjoy a wonderful afternoon. As for a little preview, next month, Chris is going to be back with another topic, and we're going to delve into something that you are always asking us, how do we start looking up our ancestors? We're going to have a little 3-part panel here, and we're going to explain things to you from a beginner's viewpoint, so to speak, because none of us will be experts. So until next month, we're glad you joined us. We hope you see you then.